I'm Janeane, and this is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. Today, I am joined by special guest Douglas Abrams. He's an author, editor, and literary agent. He's going to talk to me about the book he co-wrote called The Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World. Welcome, Doug.
Great to be with you, Janeane.
Now, how did this book come about? Because I'm going to have you share who co-authored the book as well.
Well, yeah, it was an incredible privilege to get to co-author a book with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the book actually came about because I've had the privilege of working with Archbishop Tutu for almost 2 decades on all of his various book projects. And we were at his wife's birthday down in South Africa when the president of the Dalai Lama Foundation said, "What do you think about the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu doing a book together?" And I said, "Wow, that sounds amazing."
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. What would it be about? We both paused for a second and we looked at each other and we said, joy. Because these are 2 of the most joyful people on the planet. And it was clear that if anybody could teach us about joy, it was these 2 men. And so we were at Archbishop Tutu's office, and we call him Arch, actually. So I said, "Hey, Arch, you want to do a book with the Dalai Lama?"
Are you the only one who calls him Arch?
No, all of his friends
call
him. All of his friends call him Arch, we often call him Father as well. And so I said, "Hey, Arch, you want to do a book with the Dalai Lama?" And he turns to me and he says, "I'd do anything with that man." So he wrote a letter to the Dalai Lama, and when I met the Dalai Lama for the first time in DC before we went to Dharamsala to do the book, he said, "When I got the letter, I got a little excited." And so I thought, like if you're making the Dalai Lama excited, you're
doing something right.
Excited. You're doing something right. Exactly.
How long ago? You said you met him over 20 years ago?
Yeah, almost 20 years ago, almost 2 decades ago. We started working on a book called God Has a Dream, which was a book based on sermons and talks that he had given. And Archbishop Tutu was actually my hero in college because during the anti-apartheid struggle, he came to our college and spoke. And I was thinking, like, this is this incredible, towering moral figure. And I wanted to know, like, how does this guy drive in traffic? How does, how do you live with that kind of morality, in the day-to-day world of frustration?
Yes.
So when we started working on God Has a Dream, I actually was interviewing him as we were driving in traffic, and this car cut him off. And I was like, okay, here's my chance, and so
I'm waiting.
So his first response was like the natural response we all have is like, oh my, he got afraid and he raised his hand.
Well, it depends where you live, but okay.
Right. He just had the typical human fear response. Yes. But then, he said, what he said next was, he said, "There are some amazing drivers," and I said, "So Arch, like what just went through your head? Like, how did you just process what just happened?" He said, "Well, I did get afraid, but then I thought to myself, maybe this guy is rushing to the hospital because his wife is giving birth.
Benefit of the doubt.
His wife is dying of cancer, and, poof, just like that, with that little shift in perspective from how dare this guy endanger me and cut me off, and to just shifting it to, maybe there's something that this guy is dealing with that I'm not aware of." And that, kind of shift in perspective was transformational. And so it was interesting. The first pillar of joy is perspective. And that kind of perspective shift was really profound.
It's so important because a lot of people's initial reaction, I remember driving with my dad when I was younger, and there was a lot of anger. And it was always anger, and aggression. But if you look at the root of that, it's other things going on,
Right. Well, often anger is a secondary emotion to fear. And so, we have this fight or flight response, which is, so one of the things that was interesting was to hear them talk about how fear and anger are so connected. The Dalai Lama said at one point, too much fear, too much frustration, and anger and irritation. So it's interesting. Like, there's so much fear in the world right now with the pandemic, and it's not surprising that the natural response to that fear is often anger as well.
I also feel your book is extremely timely with what's going on with the death of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And I read something this morning that this is a time of not only healing, but compassion, kindness, and greater awareness of how we can do better. And yes. I was thinking, how can I do better? What can I do? And I think we all have to have that mindset. What do you feel would be some lessons from the book that could apply to what is going on right now? Because there's so much going on.
Absolutely. I mean, I think obviously these are two of the greatest activists of the last century. Archbishop Tutu was responsible for freeing his country from a racist regime that was obviously incredibly oppressive to Black Africans, Black South Africans. And the Dalai Lama was exiled from his country. He's been an activist all his life. So I think these are two men who are not saying you got to be sitting on a cushion or in a kind of yoga class to experience joy. And what they remind us is that actually joy and happiness come out of these 8 pillars of joy. They come out of generosity. They come out of compassion. They come out of humility. They come out of recognizing that we are shared humanity and that we can do better, and that whenever somebody is oppressed, then whether it's us or somebody else in the world, we are impacted because of that shared humanity. And I think it is a powerful time. I also work with some extraordinary activists like Brian Stevenson, who's been very active in criminal justice reform. And I think what Archbishop Tutu tells us is that when you are quote unquote neutral at a time of oppression, you are actually supporting the injustice.
Yes.
And so this is not a time for neutrality. This is a time for activism. This is a time for reckoning. This is a time for recognizing that we can all do better. But we can do that. And understandably, the Archbishop Tutu used righteous indignation and anger to help free his country. And so there's nothing wrong with, anger in the service of justice. But we don't need to let that righteous indignation become corrosive to ourselves or lead us to villainize those others. Arch tells this amazing story about how, every morning he would pray for the president of South Africa, even during the time of apartheid. And so, really? When he ultimately met with him and had to help dismantle the apartheid regime and create a more just South Africa, he wasn't treating him or confronting him as his enemy. He was confronting him as his ally. And I think we can look across the protest lines and recognize that even though we may be on other sides politically from somebody else or in a particular situation of conflict, we're actually working with them to create greater justice as opposed to against them. And that that shared humanity, we as a human population, and we in this case as a nation, are trying to wrestle with the demons of our past and create a more just society. And there will be different opinions of how to do that. But we don't need to attack each other in that process. We need to join together to find the most just way forward and the most equitable way to create racial equity and class equity in our society.
Sure. So what else would you like viewers or listeners to know about your book?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that surprises people is how funny the book is. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu were like a comedy duo this whole week. They were so playful and fun and teasing each other. I mean, it was just incredible. And so, you think that these two great spiritual icons are going to be really serious and inspiring, and they certainly were inspiring, but they were also incredibly playful And the book was so much fun to write, and people say it's so much fun to read because, you go through it and you're laughing and you're crying, and, they're so moving and they're so, entertaining at the same time.
So where have you been? Are you doing any virtual talks, with even students, or mostly, different stations? Or what have you been doing with it?
Yeah, so since the book came out, I've been promoting it all over the world, actually. And, a number of colleges have chosen the book as a kind of campus-wide read.
Good.
So that's been really fun. And I've, heard from high school students and from, people of all ages, that it's been really helpful and valuable to them, especially as they've been dealing with challenges in their own lives. So that's been incredibly gratifying.
That's good. Were there some surprises along the way when you were writing this book?
Well, I mean, I think one of those surprises was just how funny they were. I think, I think another surprise was, I thought that I grew up in a family where one of my parents was suffering from depression. And I think I felt that my job was to run away from sadness and depression. And one of the things I discovered in writing the book is how they explain that joy and sorrow are inextricably linked, and that we can't have one without the other. And so what I realized is I really had to turn toward my sadness and my grief and the pain that we all experience in our lives. I just lost my dad this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And just really being able to be with that pain. And what they explained is, it was really fascinating that you can turn down the sorrow, you can turn down the sadness by drinking or distracting yourself with work or ignoring the reality of the news or the headlines. You can try to numb yourself out, but then you also numb your joy. And that the more you laugh, the more you're going to cry. But the more you cry, the more capable you are of laughing as well.
That's beautiful. I don't know if you know this, but my show is called Get the Funk Out.
Yeah, it's great.
And I really believe that sometimes you go through this really bad time. It's the worst of times, and something good will turn the corner for you. But you do have to go through that storm.
Yeah, one of the most powerful phrases that the Dalai Lama said is, adversities can become good opportunities. And I think, these are, the pandemic adversity and the economic crisis adversity and this, the pain and suffering from this racial injustices that are so prevalent in our criminal justice system. These are all opportunities for us. They call us to our higher potential and our ability to answer the call of the times. And I think that, we want to be on the right side of history. We want to bend that arc towards justice. And I think when we recognize our shared humanity, when we join with one another and we do it, and we harvest that righteous indignation, but we do it in the service of justice and our shared humanity, will get there faster.
I have chills when I watch the millions of people all over the world in protest that started as a response and probably being fed up by all the racial injustice, but was sparked by the death of George Floyd. And I'm so optimistic that there'll be something positive that comes of this, because people really are showing their humanity, and it's a wonderful thing. It's sad and there's so much going on that's negative, but I think there's going to be something positive from this.
Yeah, we desperately need criminal justice reform, policing reform, incarceration reform. We need to address the structural, systemic racial injustices and inequities that exist in our society. And it's, these are issues that we've worked on for a long time. And obviously Archbishop Tutu has worked on in his country and globally. And it feels like the world is listening in a way now that it hasn't before. And our legislators are, and there are really hopeful signs of progress. And we need to not miss this opportunity as in many cases, we have missed opportunities in other times in our history.
Yes. Anything else you'd like anybody to know about the book, and also where can they find you?
So, well, the book, has these 8 pillars of joy, which are, what the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama say are the fastest way to experiencing more joy in your life. We also included 50 pages of their joy practices, what they do to cultivate joy in their own lives, which is great. The book is available wherever books are sold. When bookstore, for the bookstores that are open now, they're available at local retailers, also online at those retailers or at the e-tailers. It's available everywhere in both paper and audio or electronic book as well.
Did you all narrate it?
So it's really fun with the the audiobook is kind of a radio play where we each read our parts. They had actors doing the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. But they do a really good job. So it's really fun.
Good. It would be great if the 3 of you did some speaking gigs.
Well, we're actually making a movie. So we had 5 cameras shooting the time together. And we're making a movie called Act Like a Holy Man. So that should be out in about a year, hopefully.
Fantastic. I want to thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being with you, and all the best to all of your listeners and viewers.
Thank you.